Disclaimer, I am not a statistician or anything of the sort. What I do here might very well be wrong, but I found this question too interesting to just pass it up. So in this video, I'll be figuring out what the most average Generation 5 Pokemon is. And so here's what I'll be talking about in this order. Generation 5, Generation 1 through 5, and my final thoughts. So let's just jump right into Generation 5's typing. Since the typing isn't a number, it's different from the other stats, so I tend to start here with this handy dandy chart. Here you can see that the most common primary type is water, with the most common secondary typing being flying. There is just two of such for Generation 5, these being Ducklet and Swanna. However, that's the average. The combined type that shows up the most is pure Psychic type, a first for this series. If this chart seems a bit hard to visualize, here's a graph that might help. On the x-axis it shows the primary type, and on the y-axis it shows, by color coding, how common a secondary typing is. So let's move right along to the regular stats. So the stats that I have used, I have sourced from a website called PokemonDB.net. This website will be linked in the description. Here's the stats I've included in this project. Total, HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, speed, primary type, secondary type, although we've already talked about that, height, weight, friendship, base XP, growth rate, gender female percent, gender male percent, genderless percent, egg cycle, and catch rate. And the final column is averageness. This is taking the sum of all these stats and comparing them to the sum of the average stats. Meaning that if this number is closer to 0, it's closer to the average. Also, the variable purple coloring in all the columns shows how close the individual stats are to the average. So the more purple, the more average, with the white background ones being far from average. This shows that the most average Pokemon is Sawk, with the averageness score being 0.5. There might be a better way to find the average. This is the way I did it. And so here is an overview of the average, the median, and the mode stats. The median is the middle value when you sort the data by values, and sometimes better represents what we usually would call the average, so I've chosen to include it here since I have all the data anyways. This time it turns out to be Thra, who has an averageness score of -4.9. Again, since I have all of the stats, I also include what the mode is. The mode means the value that shows up the most in each individual stat. So you can see here for yourself what those numbers look like. Gen 1 through 5. So again, since I have all of the data from both this gen and previous gens, I always think that it's fun to go through, well, what about so far? With the typing, the most common primary type is water, with the most common secondary typing being flying. There's 7 of such in Gen 1 through 5, as shown here. And just in case you prefer it, the combined type that shows up the most is pure normal type. If the chart again seems a bit hard to visualize, here's another graph. X-axis is the primary type and y-axis, by color coding, how common a secondary typing is. So I'm not gonna list all of the stats that I've included again, it's the same as before. And so far, the average is actually a tie between Mightyena and Venomoth, both with an averageness score of 1.1. And so here is an overview of the average, the median, and the mode stats. So the median is, again, the minimum value when the data is sorted by the values. This turns out to be a tie between Clang and Mightyena, making Mightyena both the average and the median for this segment. And the mode, again, the value that shows up the most. You can see for yourself what those numbers look like here. Final thoughts. From now on, I think I'll just be summing up the results. This segment might change its name from the next video forward, because I don't have much individual final thoughts on each generation. My conclusion is that Sock, if they were a water flying type, would be the most average Pokemon of Generation 5. And that so far, Venomoth and or Mightyena as a water flying type would be the most average Pokemon. Anyway, that's all for Generation 5.